than the story that I've heard about what happens when you die. Isaiah 38:17. Verse 18. For the dead cannot praise you. They cannot raise their voices in praise. Those who go down to the grave can no longer hope in your faithfulness. Only the living can praise you as I do today. So there's something else happening here. When you die, you're going back to dust. You're ceasing to be. This whole concept. And if you're interested in this and you're kind of like, wow, Brian, I've never heard this before, and I think you might be on something. Got a great book called The Search for the Immortal Soul. Got a few copies. If you're wrestling with this, I'll give it to you. It gives the whole history of where this came in. Predominantly through Plato's philosophy that came in of this difference of there's the spirit and the body, and the soul is good and the body's bad. That's not in the Word. In the Word, we are holistic people that are all together. We are transformed as holistic beings, all of us. Not there's this part and this part that's bad. Okay? Now, if you've read the Bible, and you've kind of wrestled around with this before, you may have come to Philippians 1:20-23. It says, for I fully expect and hope that I will never be ashamed, but that I will continue to be bold for Christ as I've been in the past. And I trust that my life will bring honor to Christ. This is Paul writing. Whether I live or die. Here's the part. For to me, living means living for Christ, and dying is even better. But if I live, I can do more fruitful work for Christ. So I really don't know which one is better. I'm torn between two desires. I long to go, die, and be with Christ, which will be far better for me. But for your sakes, it is better that I continue to live. See, Brian? There it is, right there. You die and you go be with Jesus. Okay? One of the principles of studying the Word is that you have to study the Word. Again, I've talked about this on my emails going out for deeper study if you've been looking at those, that the Word is not a systematic theology. It's not everything about a subject at one time. We love that in Western culture overall. We love that. Here's everything about this concept. These are books, things being written. So you got to read more what Paul says to understand what he's talking about. 2 Corinthians 5, starting in verse 1, he's talking about the same thing. For we know that when this earthly tent, that's my body, we live in, is taken down, that is when we die and leave this earthly body, we will have a house in heaven, an eternal body made for us by God himself and not by human hands. We grow weary in our present bodies, and we long to be put in our heavenly bodies like new clothing. For we put on our heavenly bodies, we will not be spirits without bodies. While we live in these earthly bodies, we grow inside, but it's not that we want to die and get rid of these bodies and clothes. Rather, we want to put on our new bodies, so the dying bodies will be swallowed up by life. Okay. When is this happening? What is this? He's talking about putting on a heavenly body. We're not just spirits there. We are in a body. Okay? When does this happen? 1 Corinthians 15:23. But there is an order to this resurrection. Christ was raised first, was as the first of the harvest. Then all who belong to Christ will be raised when he comes back. In verse 51 of the same chapter, but let me reveal to you a wonderful secret. We will not all die, but we will all be transformed. It will happen in a moment, in the blink of an eye, when the last trumpet is blown. For when the trumpet sounds, those who have died will be raised to live forever. When does this new body come? At the resurrection. And we who are living will also be transformed. For our dying bodies must be transformed into bodies that never die. Our mortal bodies must be transformed into immortal bodies. When does that happen? At the resurrection. What is Paul talking about? When we die, we cease to exist. We stop. So the next thing that we know is when Jesus comes down and says, hey, wake up, it's time to go. So he's saying, man, the next thing I'm going to see is Jesus. It's so much better for me to die because I'm going to be with Jesus. As soon as I die, boom, I'm going to see Jesus. This is so much better than the life I'm living down here, but I'm going to do work for God here. So I need to stay here. Luke, there's another one. Luke 20, starting in verse 43. And Jesus is on the cross and he says, I assure you, today you will be with me in paradise. See, Brian, right there. Die and go into heaven or hell, right there. Well, Greek is written completely different than English. And Greek, when the Bible was written, had no punctuation. If you take that and you move the comma, which was put in by translators, it's not there by God, it's not there by Luke, the physician who wrote this. And it says, and you were to rewrite it, I assure you today, you will be with me in paradise. That means something completely different. And that comma, again, was not there by inspiration, it was there by an interpreter. Look at one more quick objection. There's so much to cover here. Luke chapter 16. Story of rich man and Lazarus. There's a man, he dies, goes to Abraham, where he sees the rich man in torment. See? There it is, a depiction of hell. True, but no. It's a parable. This is a parable of Jesus. Parables are not told as fact. They're a story to illustrate a point. Some of them will say, well, gee, when Jesus says it has a parable, he says the kingdom of God is like. He introduces the parable. That's not always true. They can look at Matthew 21 where he has parables that he doesn't give any introduction to. This is a parable that Jesus is giving to illustrate a point that says, look, it's not about your money. It's about the poor and the downtrodden that actually come to me.